But what had been allowed to develop on Skid Row was a culture of lawlessness. And as one of the senior lead officers, Dion Joseph, said to me, I don't care if there's 150 people hanging out on San Julian Street as long as they're obeying the law. Skid Row had a national reputation. People came from across the country because they knew that this was the place where you could live for free and do what you want, that it was a law-free zone. And while certainly Carol's suggestions are absolutely valid, I think there's a sense of almost infantilizing this population, of talking about the services that we can provide, which is fine. Society has an obligation towards its most vulnerable and least fortunate members. But I think in sort of announcing, either implicitly or explicitly, as I think some of these advocates have done, you have no duty to obey the law. You are infantilizing them. And one of the most important steps you can take in moving towards the rehab is to say, we expect you to obey the laws like everybody else. And saying that you have a blank check, again, creates this sort of destruction that Commander Smith has talked about. People were killing each other and killing themselves because for too long the police have been prevented from enforcing laws that everybody else takes for granted. And I think, while certainly housing is a necessity, I think expectations of law-abiding behavior are also necessary.
Well, I think we all can find some common ground here. I think we all recognize that there are not enough beds and not enough housing for folks, in the Skid Row area, and certainly not enough for all the people in all of Los Angeles. And a lot of things that the professor was saying, I quite frankly have to agree with. There's a lot more that we as a society and as a city and as a county especially can do for this population that we have here. I recognize that in every major city I've ever been in, there's always going to be homeless folks, whether it's here or in Europe or anywhere. And I think if you look at Main Street, which was the first street that we really started working, even before we started the Safer Cities project, Sergeant McManus and the folks in the back had a Main Street project, which was, we looked at Main Street and we said, look, this is out of control, we got to change the way this is. This is in 2005, late 2005, beginning of 2006. Main Street project, we recognized that we did a survey. At 3 in the morning, there were 130 people wandering up and down Main Street. No businesses were open. These were folks that either lived and camped on the street there, across the street from Chrysalis, or across the street from Pete's Cafe, or just were hanging out there because they're blood gang members who got a hotel room at the Huntington and were out there selling their dope. They're up all night selling dope back and forth. They sleep during the day on the sidewalks over there because we were prohibited from doing anything about them. After we focused on Main Street with enough resources and police officers to change the kind of behaviors that Heather was talking about, things have completely changed on Main Street. And I cut out an article from this week's Downtown News in the back there that talked about one of the places to watch is Main Street between 4th and 7th. And 5 years ago, if you would have said that's going to be one of the quickest growing places downtown, with the exception of Pete's Cafe, there was nothing there. It was a wasteland of people camping out and whatnot. But you go down there, you still see homeless folks walking around. You still see once in a while someone who obviously has some type of, mental issues or mental health issues or whatever. But they're coexisting with the lady that owns the Metropolis bookstore, with the lady that lives in the loft up above Pete's Cafe, with the folks that are, running the Chinese or the Vietnamese food restaurant down there. It's like, I think, a city's supposed to be. A little bit of everybody there.
Before we turn to the audience, I have a question that anyone should feel free to answer. And again, it's sort of first principles. Does anyone have a right to live on the street? I mean, the country does have a history of vagrancy laws for a reason, because we thought these things would spiral out of control the way they have now spiraled out of control, in which you're now addressing. So the question is, does anyone have a right to live on the street? Or if we see 150 people, even if they're behaving themselves, is it still okay to be a vagrant?
Well, I think the laws are crafted, certainly the LAPD sidewalk law is crafted a little more narrowly than that to maybe avoid taking on that specific issue. If you are blocking the sidewalk, if you are occupying public space in a way that interferes with other people's use of that public space. There is no right for that. Again, cities are these extraordinarily vital, dynamic places that the Manhattan Institute, many other institutes, the Milken Institute, are trying to bring to their fullest potential. And if you let one group sort of stake a claim to colonize the sidewalks, I think the consequences are spread far, far beyond, and the resources that are needed to provide the sort of health that Carol rightly invokes will not be there if you kill cities by allowing public spaces to become places of absolute anarchy.
Well, I'm probably the last guy you'd think is a civil libertarian, but actually I think I am. I think that we as a society have a right to say, you know what, no, you can't just throw a tent up and start camping on a piece of public sidewalk, as long as there's some kind of an alternative for the person to go to. And I agree with you know, some of the things that have been said. You know, a cot in a room with 100 other guys, maybe that's not enough of an alternative. But I think if we can provide a place where someone can have a key to a door and a little bit of privacy, then I think we have a right to say, you know what, no, you can't sit on a tent, you know, down the street from the police station. You can't take that up as your new home, because that's a sidewalk for all of us. But I think we have to have some kind of a reasonable alternative too.
Let's open it up to the audience for questions. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Jamie Romano. I am a former Skid Row drug addict, a two-strike felon, well-recovered social justice activist and humanitarian these days. It's a pleasure to be here. I am not here in opposition at all. I'm here in a spirit of collaboration. I think the us versus them mentality from all sides doesn't serve anybody. I believe I offer a unique perspective because I've sat on that curb on Main Street and shot dope. Statute of limitation has expired. I was sure to check that. And I've worked in social services. I work on the front lines of homelessness. Obviously now I enjoy living in a nice neighborhood where there is lots of law and order and safety. But for all of us, all the parties involved, we've seen this as a very multi-layered issue. For all of us to look at each other's perspectives and find the common ground. And I know the us versus them exists on a lot of sides. I've read everything written by everybody here today. I've done some contact with, I will utter the words, Los Angeles Community Action Network, and residents of Skid Row that I still keep in touch with. And the collaboration needs to happen. We need to see each other's perspectives. The advocates don't advocate lawlessness. And all the multi-layers and ways to protect people, people are doing their best. LAPD is protecting people. LAPD is sometimes, the legal system is an obstacle to people.
Was there a question? That's a great sentiment. We appreciate that very much.
Well, it's much more than a sentiment. And my question is, if we are here today discussing the criminalization of homelessness, where are the voices, not just the academics criticizing policy, where are the people representing the homeless and their interests and their experience? Where is the forum where they are heard and considered and regarded?
Okay, good question. Anybody want to address that?
I guess I'd love to respond, because as you began speaking, I thought she should have been on our panel. So I was glad that you said what you said. I think you're one of the real experts in the room on this issue, and I really appreciate what you said. And as you were saying it, it struck me that, you know, sometimes things, for good or bad, and my role here isn't to defend some of the public behavior that I think disturbs everyone and victimizes many people. But sometimes things have to get so bad before anyone even looks to see what's going on in the lives of these folks. And I would really hope that in that same spirit of collaboration, of really beginning to understand and listen to one another's perspectives, if the political will and the resources that have gone into this effort so far translate into the political will to do something better to address the needs that now more people are looking at, and we can come out the other end of this with something that we can all be proud of. So thank you.
There's a microphone.